and start ritual. Today, my purpose is to reveal the secret to you. So some portion I cannot to explain in front of the public, but as much as I can, I try to explain what is going on. Okay, so we have only 15 minutes. So usually our Tendai tradition, funeral ceremony takes about 1 hour. So I have to very squeeze into 15 minutes. Once enter the ascent to the main seat and start ritual. There are two major rituals here. First is a protection. Tendai, as you know, Tendai Buddhism has four basic elements. One is Lotus Sutra tradition. Second is esoteric tradition. Third is Zen tradition or meditation. And fourth is a precept. Then first, I'd like to utilize the esoteric tradition. That is the start ritual. First, we're going to protect our body and spirit. Okay? Then, Goshimbo, this is starting the lotus flower to start the open. Then open. Then the flower is blossom. And then we're going to tie. Then next is the Goshimbo. The 5 elements: head, shoulder, heart, and throat. From the spiritual world, we have to protect. And then this is called kanji. Only a thumb or parent finger and the pointer. This is open the gate, and then every spirit go away. This is the first ritual in front of the. Then next, we want to purify. This is also using esoteric Buddhism, the pure water. Okay, so pure water, you can understand what is pure water. But I tell you how to make the pure water. So water plus incense, special incense input. This is my master told me. If I made the pure water, I have to keep for my life. No need to throw away one time. So if we can put new fresh water and then put the incense again, so we can keep continuously. So this is my master told me. So I'm going to use pure water made by special incense. Then first we're going to first I have to concentrate the letter of Ram, and then Lamban, 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 Lamban. That means purify. Then 6 place. First north, east, south, west, above, and below. So then purify our setting. Then we want to start the chant. statement including history of the deceased person. Then next, initiation of Syrian refugee. So I'd like to give the English translation for you. Now I wish forever to take refuge in Buddha and his 2 feet worthy one. I take refuge in Dharma to be free from desire. I take refuge in Sangha to be free from desire. I finally take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Then we repeat 3 times. Then we're going to chant the Amitabha Sutra. Only 1 verse, just I'd like to chant. This is the main point for the funeral ritual in Japanese called Indo. So this time we're going to give the 3 pure precepts and offering Buddhist name. But the Tendai tradition focus on offering Buddhist name is supposed to be alive, your flesh and body. Yeah. But unfortunately in the society, everybody is busy during their career. So they don't have a chance to become official Buddhist disciple. So that this time we're going to give the Buddhist name. Plus 3 pure precepts means first keep precept, then next is encouraging to precept, then finally to helping other people. Such kind of pure precept. But the Tendai tradition is based on Fanwanchin in Japanese Bonmogyo, 10 major precepts and 48 minor precepts, but we're going to give 3 pure precepts at this time. Then giving the holy Buddhist name. Then depend on the order is changeable, like Amitabha Sutra, Indo, and individual offering incense. So depend on the situation we can arrange. And then finally we have about 2 more minutes to recite Nembutsu. There are 2 kinds of Nembutsu we have. So first, I'd like to chant the traditional Nembutsu, then ordinary Nembutsu. Okay? This is about 1200 years, Tendai mission, Tendai school, transmission. Then next, ordinary Nembutsu. 光明返上一波世界念仏上天主者 Tendai mission or Tendai school using the 108 rosary. Then we're going to, what I say, transfer email to everybody. Okay. If I go out, this means you're going to receive. And then in front of Buddha, I'm going to receive the spiritual power this way. So this is, thank you very much, just on time.
Thank you very much, Sensei. That was a short lesson in Tokyo. So Sensei says if you'd like to have the longer version, then come to the temple. It's located at 23 Jack Lane. It's right next to Temple Emmanuel. It gives you some flavor, at least, of the rituals that we have for our funeral services. And the altar is one that enshrines Amida Buddha. These are the characters. It says Namu Amida Buddha in Chinese. Namu Amida. Sometimes you see a picture, of the standing Buddha. All right, we'll move on to the next. We don't want to take too much time away from our next speaker. Dr. Helen Baroni is with the Religion Department at the University of Hawaii, and she was born in Connecticut. That word is so hard for me to say, Connecticut. So Helen says, say New England. I think it might be easier to say. And while the handymen are moving the tables, let me continue. And Dr. Baroni received a PhD from Columbia University. And she studied also in Japan. She says not at Tokyo University, but at Hanazono. Maybe some of you know that. It is a Zen school in Kyoto. Professor at Hanazono Daigaku, a Professor Ogata, who was at the University of Chicago when I was there. And it is a very good school. And so when Ogata Sensei came, the University of Chicago was very happy to receive him. At that time, this was many, many years ago, so Dr. Joachim Bach was Professor of History of Religions there. And we did have a lot of fun. Dr. Baroni's specialty is in the study of Obaku Zen. We hear of Soto Zen and Rinzai Zen, but Obaku is perhaps a stricter form of Rinzai Zen, and she has that as her specialty. So Dr. Baroni will speak on ties that bind, ongoing relationships between the living and the dead in Japanese culture. So if Dr. Baroni will come forward. And Reverend Shigenori Makino and Reverend Robert Nakamura, please come forward also. And they will be the respondents.
Good afternoon. I want to start by telling you how I decided on my topic for today. This past semester, I had a student in one of my introductory classes on Japanese religion. And she came to me one day and she said that she had a serious matter she wanted to talk to me about. She wanted my help with. She was having problems with a recurring nightmare, and it was coming more and more often, and it was beginning to overwhelm her. It was all that she could think about, so that she was actually afraid that it was going to interfere with her studies at this point in the semester. In her dream, an aunt, you have to excuse me, I'm from New England, that's actually how I say that word all the time. An aunt of hers had died a number of years ago, and this aunt was coming to her as a spirit. So that in the dream she knows that her aunt is dead. When I dream about relatives who have died, they're always still alive. In this case, no. It was clear that the spirit was dead. And what she wanted to tell her niece was that she was lonely, extremely lonely. And the student said that this distressed her. She wanted to know whether or not it was true. Is her aunt suffering? Is she lonely? And if she is, why was she calling on her to help? Some of her friends had said that she should go to see a Buddhist priest here in town who knows how to handle these situations. But her mother had suggested that maybe what she should do is seek the help of a psychiatrist or a psychologist. And so my friend was now even more, or my student was even more concerned because perhaps she actually was suffering from a psychological problem. So she didn't really know what to do, and so she decided to come to ask for my advice. Well, I didn't know what to do because I'm not a priest and I'm not a counselor, and I didn't really know what help I could offer her. So in good academic fashion, I decided to tell her academically how I thought that her dream might be interpreted within the context of the Japanese cultural milieu. I should give you a little background. This student of mine, she and her immediate family are Buddhist, but her aunt was, I think, Southern Baptist. She was a Christian in any case, and she had been buried according to Christian rites, so that no one in the family was doing the traditional series of memorial services, Buddhist memorial services, that would ordinarily be done when a Japanese dies. And so I should tell you that in a Japanese context, the failure to do that cycle of services can be thought of as a breach, a breakdown in the relationship between the living family and the family who has already died. And so that it was possible that this was the cause of the problem, that her aunt was coming to ask for help with this. The relationship between the living and the dead is said to be reciprocal. There's a sense in which the living aid the dead, and the dead in response aid the living. It is also possible, and this point is sometimes a little controversial in Buddhist contexts, it's sometimes said that not only can we aid one another, each side of the divider of death, but that also a certain harm can be done. The living can harm the dead can harm the living. So that it would be possible within the Japanese context to interpret her dream either as harm, well, I'll talk about some of the other possibilities as I go along, but at least that a breach had occurred in the relationship and that the breach needed to be healed, and that was one way that her dream could be interpreted. She did actually seek the help of a Buddhist priest, and she actually feels a lot better now, she tells me. So the dream has gone away. What I want to do today is I want to spell out, in general terms, not in much detail, how the Japanese view the relationship between the living and the dead, and the rituals that mark that relationship, that ongoing relationship. It doesn't end with the funeral service as it does in some religious traditions. It's a very long process that goes on. And I also want to talk about some of the interpretations of the rituals that are provided. The interpretations are like an intricately woven web. Some of the strands are Buddhist, some of the strands are Shinto, some of the strands come from various parts of the folk tradition. Most of the strands, the dominant portion of the tradition, is in fact Buddhist. Most Japanese, when they die, well, I guess when you're dead you don't. What happens when most Japanese die is the family typically goes to the Buddhist temple for services. That's the norm. Shinto, in fact, regards death as pollution, as a form of pollution, so that Shinto funeral services are quite rare and really didn't happen very much before the Meiji period, when they were created in effect. But they're still very rare. So the dominant portion of the tapestry we'll be talking about is Buddhist, but it's very clear that there's a good bit of other interpretation going on as well. Okay. Now, in general terms, there are two kinds of rituals or observances that the living use to commemorate, to honor the dead within the Japanese culture. One set is linear, and the other set is cyclical. What I mean by linear is they have a clear beginning point in time, and that's the time of death, and they continue at specified intervals over a long number of years, but then in fact they end. There are these linear services that are offered, that a family will offer for an individual member of the family who has died. Cyclical observances happen on an annual basis. It follows the calendar, so that they go on year in and year out. And for these, it isn't individuals that are being honored, but all of the ancestors, all of the deceased relatives as a whole will be honored at the cyclical events, with one specific case that I'll mention as we go along. There's almost always an exception. But in general, you can think of the linear services as being for individuals, and the cyclical services being for the whole of the ancestors. Now, at the time of death, typically what happens is the family, and I guess we heard about this a little bit this morning, the Buddhist priest would appreciate hearing the call a little earlier, but in any case, at the time of death, as soon as possible, the family will invite a priest to come, and the priest will say a brief prayer. Usually the face of the deceased is covered. That prayer is called the Pillow Sutra, or Makurakyo. That's what the term means, Pillow Sutra, because it's meant to be a deathbed service. It's meant to be said just as soon after death as possible. These days it's often performed at the hospital. Now, that custom is not really all that ancient. It actually only goes back to the Tokugawa period, which is the period I study. During the Tokugawa period, the government, in its desire to control Christianity, required that a Buddhist priest examine every deceased body, every dead body, and fill out a form, of course, fill out a report before a death certificate could be issued, and then permission for burial could be received. So that apparently this Pillow Sutra dates from this time, and it became quite universal then as a part of examining the body, very naturally to say a sutra, read some verses over the body. After that time, the body is prepared for burial, whatever form that will take. I don't want to talk about all the details. There are a lot of traditions for how the body is treated. It's washed and dressed. It will be laid out in a particular manner. The head will face north. What's important, I guess, in a sense, symbolically about all these things, is that the dead is treated in a way that is inverted from the way we deal with the living. And this is consistent, and members of the Japanese community perhaps will realize this. This will sound very familiar to you. You don't normally sleep with your head to the north. The dead are laid to rest in that position, and other things that are opposite from when one is alive are done in preparing the body and during the funeral services. One other thing I want to say about the funeral, and this is by no means unique to Japan, but the funeral is an opportunity to celebrate, if you will, relationships among the living community. So that it isn't just family members and friends who will attend a funeral, but also representatives or members of societies, groups, etc., that the dead person was a member of and that family members belong to will also come to the funeral as well to reestablish those ties. So that, for example, we had a member of the department, the religion department, a father died, and at that time the chair of the department, George Tanabe, who spoke earlier today, he served as our representative at the funeral service, so that our department was represented despite the fact that of course this person had not been a member, but the child was a member. Now traditionally, the primary period of mourning, and you've heard reference to it before, and I'll talk a good bit about it. The primary period of mourning continues from the time of death for 49 days. And those 49 days are marked by a sequence of seventh-day services. Every 7 days, traditionally, a service would be held. So there's the first seventh day, the second seventh day, which is the 14th day, and so on. These services are Buddhist in content and in form, although I should mention that there are some parts of the 49 days that look very Shinto to my eyes. This is part of Shinto tradition being blended in. I've already said that Shinto regards death as polluting, and during those 49 days, the immediate family is traditionally thought of as in some sense polluted by that connection with death. So that during that mourning period, members of the immediate family traditionally weren't supposed to go to Shinto festivals. They really weren't supposed to go to public events at all. They were supposed to contain the pollution that they had experienced in a way, and stay out of large public gatherings. Now, the Japanese have become a lot less concerned about these pollution issues in the modern period, but there are some of the traditions, therefore, have sort of fallen away, and I don't think many people observe the 49 days very strictly any longer. But there are some rituals that still indicate to us that pollution is an issue in relationship with the funeral, with the process of memorializing the dead. That is that most people, after attending a funeral, will still put salt on themselves to purify themselves. And one of my students said, very often you receive a packet of salt as you depart the funeral, so that you can do that, so that, in case you've forgotten. Salt is a purifying element in Shinto, so that's a Shinto element that comes into the funeral. In any case, the entire process of the 49-day services, these Buddhist services, are thought of as a purifying process for everybody concerned, for the family members, and most especially for the spirit of the deceased. I should say I'm going to be drawing mostly on my knowledge of Zen, the Zen tradition, for talking today. I think in the basic contours, most of what I'm going to say is in keeping, at least in a broad sense, with other denominations, but the respondents will be able to clarify some of the differences that do exist, especially since I know that some changes have occurred here in the Hawaiian Japanese community. Now, part of the funeral arrangements include, and we've already heard about this, a posthumous name, a death name, a Buddhist name for the deceased. It's called, one of the names that's used in Japanese is kaimyo. The word kaimyo means precept name. It's usually given on the seventh day, the first seventh-day service, so the seventh day after death. And that's the name that a monk or a nun would receive at ordination when they receive the precepts. And so it's a precept name. And as we've already heard, most Japanese receive that name after death. So symbolically, they're taking the tonsure. Symbolically, they're becoming monks and nuns. And from the first seventh-day service, from that service on, the funeral service will in fact treat them as a monk or a nun. Indeed, there were no traditional memorial services, at least within the Zen community, before it arrived in Japan for lay people. There were traditional services for ordinary monks and for abbots. And when they arrived in Japan and they needed to develop a ceremony, a funeral ceremony for lay people, what they did was they modified the ceremony that had been used for ordinary monks and nuns. And so they ordained the person symbolically on the first day, and then they followed the ordinary service for a monk. The posthumous name will be written on a memorial tablet. The memorial tablet in Japanese is ihai, or o ihai. And the family will keep that for a number of years as a physical symbol for the person who has died. The tablet eventually, actually quite quickly, is going to be placed on a family Buddhist altar, a butsudan. But that doesn't happen until after the 49th day. There's a sense in which even the ihai, this physical symbol for the deceased, is polluted and needs the purification process of those 7 seven-day services done over the 49 days before it would be appropriate to put it up on a shelf next to the existing ihai, if there are any. So there's still this interest in pollution that's here that we don't really see within the ancient Buddhist tradition. It isn't what we come into contact with from the outside that pollutes us in the ancient Buddhist tradition. Contact with blood would not necessarily be polluting. It's internal attachments or behavior that we manifest that would be a problem rather than contact from the outside. But we can see that in the Japanese context, purity and pollution are a serious concern. After the 49th day service, the family is going to hold a series of memorial services traditionally. There'll be a 100th day service. First anniversary is the most important after the 49th day. 100th day service, first anniversary of death, 3rd, 7th. It's really easy to come up with the numbers because they're all the numbers with 3s and 7s. 3, 7, 13, 17, 23, 27. There are some variations in denominations. And the 33rd, in many cases, is the last service. In some cases, the 50th year will mark the end. But whichever is the marking the end, there will be a final annual memorial service for a specific individual. At that time, after that service, the family will dispose of the ihai, the memorial tablet. I think most of the time they give them back to the temple, but there are a variety of ways to dispose of it properly. And then in most cases, in most people's minds, the person who died no longer has individual characteristics. They've passed into a sort of a general category of ancestors now. They've been purified enough so that they've lost their individual characteristics. And they're only going to be memorialized at the annual cyclical events. It also makes a lot of sense because after 33 or 50 years, there are very few people left in the community who have any real memory of that individual person. So there's a sort of sense in the limiting of how many years the memorial services will go on. Okay, a few words about the collective services. There are 3 or 4 times a year when the deceased are remembered, when the ancestors are remembered as a group. These are Kigan, or the equinoxes, in spring and then in the autumn. There's Obon, and sometimes New Year's. In some parts of Japan, at least, New Year's is still celebrated in memorializing the dead. At each of these festival periods, it's traditional for a family to visit the family grave, to clean it, and then to make offerings there at the grave. They'll offer fresh flowers, incense, water, special food, something of this variety. And of the times I've mentioned, the most important is clearly Obon. So I'll say a little bit more about the Bon festival. Bon is based on a festival celebrated throughout East Asia. It's the Buddhist festival or ceremony of Ulambana. That ceremony was designed as a way to save those living beings who are suffering in hell as hungry ghosts. For those of you who aren't familiar with what a hungry ghost is, it's one of the existences that is possible within the 6 levels of being. Hungry ghosts are always hungry. They have tremendously large stomachs, and their throats are like a needle, so that they can get very little in, so that they are perpetually hungry. They're called in Japanese gaki. So this ceremony was designed originally to alleviate their suffering. The tradition says that one of the Buddha's leading disciples, we call him in Japanese Mokuren, he approached the Buddha to ask his advice. He wanted to help his mother, his deceased mother. Mokuren had amazing powers. because of his Buddhist practice. And after his mother died, he wanted to know what had happened to her. And so he traveled through the realms looking for her, and he eventually found her suffering as a gaki, as a hungry ghost. And he, because of his power, was able to travel down to where she was, and he offered her food and water to alleviate her suffering. And the story goes that when she took his offering of food, it turned to fire in her mouth, so that he couldn't feed her directly. He couldn't help her himself. So he went to the Buddha and he asked the Buddha what he should do. And the Buddha said that at the end of the rainy season retreat, when the merit that the community, the Sangha, the monks and nuns had built, was at its highest peak, at the end of that ceremony, or that ritual period, he should offer the Sangha a feast. And that way, symbolically at least, that would be able to ease the suffering for the hungry ghosts suffering in hell. Now in Japan, the focus of Obon is much less on hungry ghosts and much more on ancestors. So let me tell you a little bit about how ancestors are celebrated at this festival. It's said, well, traditionally, Japanese are supposed to travel back to their native village at Obon. And the idea is that they will be there then to welcome back their ancestors who come back for a yearly visit, if you will. According to the folk tradition, the spirits of the deceased normally live either in the mountains or out to sea. They're very vague. I'll talk about this in a little bit. Very vague where they actually are. But at Obon, they come home for a visit. They come back to the land of the living for a visit. Symbolically, two offerings are made at this time, cucumbers and eggplant. The cucumber is said to represent a horse. And the idea is that when they're coming back to the land of the living, we want them to travel very quickly. So we give them a horse to get back on. And then the eggplant represents a cow. When they actually leave to go back, we want them to go slowly so that we can say a nice long goodbye at the end. Anyway, that's the story of the offerings. There are also lanterns that will be lighted at the beginning to light the way of the ancestors coming back, and lanterns lit at the end to see them off so that they go. In the in-between period, between welcoming them and seeing them off, there will be typically Obon dancing, Bonodori, which is entertainment for both the living and the dead, traditionally. And in general, it's supposed to be somewhat festive, although there's always some bittersweet element because of the recently deceased. I should say that a lot of Japanese participate today in Obon as a very secular holiday. I mean, I bet a lot of the Buddhists in the room celebrate Christmas. There's a lot of Japanese who celebrate Obon in a very secular manner, and so they may dance at Obon without really thinking of it as a religious service of any sort. Anyway, the other thing that we see, I mentioned that there's one special practice that singles out individual spirits at the end, at the cyclical events, and that's at Obon for the recently deceased. Anybody who's died in the year since the last Obon will be especially remembered at their first Obon. It's a special one for the recently dead. A special altar may be set up for their ihai. And at the end of the festival, really after we've said goodbye to all the other spirits, then lanterns will be lighted, special lanterns that are released into usually a river or perhaps the ocean and are sent out, offered to the recently deceased to see them off for the first Obon. It's the first time they go off then with the rest of the ancestors. Now here in Honolulu, I've seen it done at the Alawai. And I have to say there's only one little problem with that, and that is that they don't actually go out to sea when they go on the Alawai. There's a tradition in a lot of parts of Japan that if those Shodo Nagashi, those lanterns for the recently dead, if they go out and then come back on the tide, then that means that the harvest will be bad, because Obon is right before the harvest. So I don't know what this means, but you put them in the Alawai and pick them up at the other end. Anyway, a few changes here. Okay, now, some of the positive interpretations for these rituals. I want to talk about what do these rituals indicate about the relationship between the living and the dead. So to begin with, there is a positive and mutually beneficial relationship that's indicated by these events. The bond of devotion and filial piety that exists between living parents and living children is the pattern on which we can see filial obligation continuing between the living and the dead. It's an ongoing process. We feel an obligation to our predecessors, and so we make offerings for their sake, and then in turn we receive blessings back from them. We receive benefits from them. So that the living family is thought of as offering services that ultimately lead to the deceased relative becoming either an enlightened being, a Buddha, or perhaps a kami, or an ancestor spirit. And the spirits of the dead continue to come back and visit and protect their living, surviving family. Focusing a little bit on the Buddhist strands of this tapestry, the funeral services, say the ones during the 49 days, those are designed to build merit. Rebirth is based on karma, but this merit can be transferred, it's believed, during this period in particular, to the deceased, because during the 49-day period, the spirit has not yet taken on its next, whatever its next form will be. This is an intermediate period. And so during that time, services are offered in the hopes that you can ensure a better rebirth for the person who has died, perhaps rebirth in the Pure Land, Amida's Pure Land. I will say that the Shinshu sect, the Shin tradition, does deny this interpretation, and I think that Reverend Makino might have something to say about this issue. They will openly say they are doing the services for the sake of the living rather than just for the sake of a better rebirth. Now, even though Buddhism does teach this idea of reincarnation so that you would want to ensure a better rebirth for the person who's died, there are aspects of Japanese popular tradition that suggest that that's not exactly what Japanese believe. To begin with, the term used for the spirits of the dead, or for the dead, is Hotoke, which is a term that, as it is written and as it is spoken both ways, means the Buddha or a Buddha, an enlightened being. So there's a sense in which the dead become Buddhas or enlightened beings just by dying and having the memorial services spoken for them. There's some sense in saying that. And there are also indications that there's a belief in Japan that the dead go on existing forever as spirits living in a world of the dead, not being reborn continually until they attain enlightenment. Let me talk a little bit about some of the Shinto understandings of the memorial process, where this comes from, I think. In this sense, the family is said to assist the dead spirit in becoming one of the benevolent ancestors who helps the living family. At the beginning of the process, the spirit is polluted by the very experience of death. And so the Buddhist rituals are used in order to wash away and wash away that pollution, purify the spirit in a progressive manner, until eventually, when the whole process is done, the dead spirit is thought of, the Hotoke, the Buddha, in a sense becomes a kami, or an ancestor who protects the family. So there's that understanding of the process. And that person will, or that person, the ancestors come back on a yearly basis, as it were, to visit and protect. Before I talk a little bit about negative interpretations, I want to talk about where the dead reside. I already mentioned that there's some people say that they live in the mountains or at sea. In Shinto concepts of the world, cosmology, there's a plane of heaven above us where the kami live. There's the world of the living where we are, and there's a world of the dead, which is sort of vague for exactly where that is. But the three worlds are not completely separate, and there can be movement between them, interaction between them. So there's also this sense that the spirits stay in the world of the dead forever, coming back on a yearly basis for visits. We see this, in fact, in the way the memorial tablet is treated. Once the process is over, it can be disposed of. There are also traditions that suggest that Japanese believe that the spirit is in some sense present at the gravesite. Offerings are made at the gravesite, or at the place where a death happened, especially if it's accidental. Maybe some of you remember back in the 80s, I think it was the 80s, a big jumbo jet flew into a mountain in Japan, a very steep slope. To this day, there are family members, surviving family members, who make very difficult treks to the site of that plane crash in order to place offerings there at that site. Why are they doing that? Well, when newspapers have asked them, they have indicated that one father in particular has been interviewed a bit, and he says that his son died in the crash, and he feels that his son is there waiting for him. And if he weren't to go and visit, then his son would be lonely. So that he feels that his son is longing for his company. The dead rely upon the living, and he has to go there in order to help him. This is probably despite memorial services held in the usual way. Okay, very briefly now, a few comments about sort of darker side. I've only talked about positive parts or interpretations of the relationship. Now, some people will maintain that the dead would never come back and hurt the living, that the dead would never harm surviving family, for example. They would only protect them. But there are customs and folk traditions that suggest that this may not be universal. There may be other beliefs. To begin with, there are some spirits that pose a potential threat to the living. For example, vengeful spirits, wandering spirits, the newly dead, especially those who die in some unnatural way. The folk tradition maintains that the body and the spirit are separate, that they part at death, but that the spirit will remain in the vicinity of the body for a little while, maybe during those 49 days before the spirit takes on its next state, whatever that will be. In any case, during an unstable period, right after death, there's a little bit of danger. In particular, a spirit might get kind of lost and might linger too long and not know how to proceed. Now, a person who dies without surviving family, and this is why the pre-death rituals are sometimes done, or a person whose family forgets to take care of them and offer the services, might fall into this situation. These are pitiful figures because the dead rely on the living in order to be helped. At Obon, there are still offerings made to take care of them. I'm getting a signal from the back. Time? Okay, all right. I will cut it short a little bit, just to say that there are negative possibilities. I'll stop with one rather sweet story that suggests that it isn't always harm that the dead bring, but bringing it back to the dream that my student had. There's a story in the Ugetsu Monogatari in which the spirit of a woman haunted, I guess you'd say it's her ghost, haunted her husband. She didn't mean to harm him at all. According to the story, the man is a businessman and he leaves his wife, and when they part, she's worried that he won't come home. And so he promises he will be back by the fall. He goes off to Kyoto, to the capital, and a war breaks out. And he isn't able to come home for many, many years. Many years pass. He finally makes his way home, and his entire village is in ruins. The only house standing is his own. He goes into the house, his wife is waiting for him. They have a very bittersweet reunion. They cry, they tell each other about the sufferings and their years of separation. They go to bed. In the morning he wakes up and his house is a ruin. His wife is gone. And he realizes that the woman that he spoke with and that he slept with was indeed his wife's ghost. She had died many years previously of grief because of his absence. And without anyone to offer the appropriate services for her soul, she had remained there at her home, waiting for him. And so he is able then to find the site where she was buried and to make the ritual offerings, and eventually she finds peace. So I guess I'll end with that story since I've run over a bit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee. That Obaki story was She has a lot of those. So I'd like to talk with her. She's at the religion department. Thank you. Now we'll have a few comments. Respondents. Thank you, John Jianpo. Okay, very much, you know, is oldest.
Good afternoon. After Dr. Baroni's dynamic speech, I needed to relax a little bit. I wonder if, how many of you here non-Buddhist? Will you stand up? And exercise. How many of you are Buddhist? Thank you. How many of you are Buddhist? Jodo Shinshu. Okay, thank you very much. Just for my information. Listening to the Dr. Baroni's presentation, I come to realize there's a big difference between what Buddhism teaches or Jodo Shinshu teaches and what common people think what is Buddhism. And Dr. Baroni discussed from the standpoint of cultural context of Buddhism and concerning death and memorial service type of things. And to respond to her presentation, I have lots of detail. Maybe I have to respond from the Jodo Shinshu point of view in the technicality, but since limited time, and besides somewhere there pressing the time, so I'm running. Anyway, I think I'm responsible and I'm expected to respond from the Buddhist point of view, or rather Shinshu, Jodo Shinshu point of view. And although there are many areas to clarify, but because of time, I would like to focus on a couple issues. One is Buddhist view toward the death, and meaning of memorial service. And the rest of the small detail maybe I cannot talk about today. The purpose of Buddha Dharma is to deal with the issues of birth and death, with suffering, pain, and anxiety that arises from ignorance, blindness, and attachment. Buddha Dharma teaches that death is a part of life, a natural course of life, and that's not negative or positive, that's a reality. And that although none of us can predict what may significantly alter our lives, we are always embracing absolute wisdom and compassion to live fully, and therefore is to be prepared for all events with trust and serenity, and to avoid morbid preoccupation with death and concern about what will happen to us when we die. Death clarifies life's truth. Dying is a part of human condition. To live decently, then serenity, leave this world, is a total fulfillment. This is, I'm quoting Reverend Fujitani's the article from this, so please read. Especially when you read about funeral, and Reverend Fujitani has a very nice article. Anyway, Buddhism is a way to transcend birth and death, whether liberation from the life and death, spiritual liberation. According to Shakyamuni Buddha, or his final word of Buddha, I'm quoting from the teaching of Buddha published by the then Buddha Kyokai. Quoting, "My disciple, my last moment has come, but do not forget that death is only end of physical body. The body is born from parents and nourished by food, just as inevitable sickness and death. But the true Buddha is not a human body. It is enlightenment. A human body must die, but the wisdom of enlightenment will exist forever in the truth of the Dharma and in the practice of the Dharma. He who sees merely my body does not truly see me. Only he who accepts my teaching truly see me. After my death, Dharma shall be your teacher. Follow the Dharma, you'll be truly true to me. And then he said, make yourself a light. Rely upon yourself. Do not depend on anyone else. In these immortal words of Buddha, the Buddha taught us that there was something more important than the body. He was pointing to the power of enlightenment which all beings possess. Too often we are attached to the visible body and forget about invisible potential power which is human body possess, to enlighten ourselves and to help others become enlightened. This is the true energy of human life that never perish. The physical body dies, but this energy never dies. Make of yourself light. These are powerful words. We must search for the inner light, which is infinite Buddha within. Nobody can find the Buddha for us. Each person must find the Buddha. And when we find the Buddha, we realize that it was this Buddha, the great power of wisdom and compassion that was operating within us throughout timeless time. So, when Buddha was asked, when he was passing by, the disciple asked Buddha, what will happen? What shall we do after you die? Then he said, forget about it. Don't worry about it. The scholar will take care. The body is not important. As Shinran Shonin said also, same kind of line. When I'm gone through the body into the Kama River and make it fish food. From the Jodo Shinshu point of view, once you realize this wisdom, compassion embrace us all the time, no matter what I am, whoever I am, just leave it to entrust to this great compassion. So, Genda said, just die, entrust yourself. Or Ryokan said, Shinu toki wa shinu ga yoroshi, when you die, just die. You know that maybe some of you heard at the hospital situation, older patients say, akirameru. And people maybe misunderstood. Akirameru, when common usage is give up. But from the profound meaning of akirameru means taikan, which is a great awareness, understanding, or great acceptance of the fact. This is a natural course. So it is not necessarily giving up, resigning, but great acceptance in peace. This is often used as a skillful means of turning the Dharma wheel, a meaningful and sacred opportunity to reflect upon the meaning of life and death. There was a saying, or an anonymous person wrote this, when you neglect your own death, your life goes in papers. When you suddenly come to know your own death, your life crumbles. Only when you transcend your own death your life will be fulfilled. So from the Buddhist point of view, death is not necessarily shakas or anything. About the funeral service or any memorial service, but any funeral service has a profound religious purpose, which is to affirm the oneness of deceased as well as our service with the infinite Buddha. The funeral have to pay the respect of the deceased, and also the therapeutic value for those who survive. Any memorial service in Buddhist memorial service, especially Honganji or Jodo Shinshu, after a funeral, there are various memorial services we held. Weekly service of 49 days, and 1 year, 3rd year, or 100 day, 1 year, 3rd year, 13, 17, 25, 33, and 50, or maybe 100. These are the memorial service held, but this is not for the sake of the deceased, but it is solely for the living. It is to remind us that life is transcendent and that we are warmly embraced in the compassion heart of Amida Buddha. It is an act of consolation for the survivor and the way to encourage reflection concerning the matter of life and death. You know, during the memorial service, traditionally, we read, the Shinshu priests read the Hakkotsu no Kobensho, a chapter of ashes written by Rennyo Shonin-san 450 years ago in Japanese and translation. But the first portion stating the fleeting nature of human life, and then says, by so understanding the meaning of death, we shall come to fully appreciate the meaning of this life, which is unrepeatable, and thus to be treasured above way of earth. By virtue of true compassion, let us realize the unexcelled value of human existence, and let us together live with our Nembutsu in our hearts. So this life, unrepeatable, precious life, to live in the embrace of Amida's compassion. This is here and now we are talking about. So we don't worry about whatever happened, or, you know, soul or spirit. So anyway, this, let's see, make it, Tokura Sensei doesn't have time, so I just I will explain to second portion is to clarifying the meaning of memorial service in Jodo Shinshu point of view. I don't know where to skip. You know, according to my psychiatrist friends, she said, psychoanalyst, she was saying, if grief is properly dealt with, it takes about 50 days or so to go through the process. Unless we do it properly, especially when the loved one dies, many people go through deep grief, especially when the person did not have enough chance to grieve. Often it persists a long time without one's own realization, and which affect his life one way or others, unless it is properly dealt with. So this memorial service, especially first 49 days, for the living, for the survivor, to give a chance weekly, support from the family members and relatives or friends come together, give enough support to be able to express their grief and sadness. So gradually they can relieve from that sadness that goes through the process. And second one is through the listening to the Dharma, person may be able to accept the reality of life, which is, impermanent, and this is include our service. Third meaning is through the service, it nurtures personal growth and spiritual enrichment. And also, important byproduct of this custom has been the reinforcing of the family and sense of continuity from generation to generation. And one of the things I want to add here is chanting sutra during the service, memorial service, just we had. Quite often misunderstood, because just like we are chanting for the dead. But the sutra chanting is always to praise the Buddha's virtue and to realize our things. Anyway, the signaling, I don't have 50 minutes yet. Anyway, let me see, I conclude here. Especially from the Jodo Shinshu perspective, I feel responsible to cover many other areas, such as Homyo, and the tablet, Oihai, ours is a Kakocho, Yukon and Shojin and all those things. But anyway, there are many misconceptions and misunderstandings which I should discuss. But since there is not much time now to do so, I have to stop now. However, if anyone has any question concerning all these matters, please don't hesitate to talk to me later. Thank you very much.
He is from the Shingon.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for bearing with us. I know it's been a very long day for all of you. First of all, I'm from the Shingon Mission of Hawaii, and I was ordained as a priest approximately 10 years ago. I came from a lay family. My father was not a priest. And a lot of the questions that Dr. Baroni, the topics that Dr. Baroni mentioned today was questions that I had while I was growing up here in Hawaii. I'm a third-generation Japanese, born and raised here in Hawaii. Went to the University of Hawaii and graduated from public school. And all of these things that I've been doing while I was growing up here in Hawaii made me wonder, why am I doing it? Why is it that I'm doing these things as a Buddhist? I go to the temple, I pray, when somebody dies we have to do all these rituals. Why? Why? That's not the reason why I became a priest or a Shingon. And of all religions, I became a Shingon priest. I was born as a Jodoshu family. My family is Jodoshu. But my parents also my grandparents also happen to believe in Kobodaishi, Bodai-sama. And that's what Shingon is all about. Some of the things that Dr. Baroni mentioned really struck me about the relationship with Buddhism and Shintoism. And I guess I would have to go back 1,200 years ago when our founder, Kobodaishi, or Kukai, went to China in what was then Chang'an, or the present Xi'an. And by the way, when you go to the Academy of Arts and you see that display they have, brings back a lot of things for me, thinking that, oh God, this is something that happened during the time that my founder of my religion went to this era and studied the Tantric Buddhism, the esoteric Buddhism, during that time, 1,200 years ago, and brought it to Japan, and now it's spread to the United States. It's something that really opened my eyes. And when Kobodaishi brought back the esoteric Buddhism to Japan, his philosophy was that the Shinto gods, the god of light, Amaterasu Omikami, and the Buddha of light, Dainichi Nyorai, Mahavairojana Tathagata, is the one and the same. And that's where the relationship between Shintoism and Buddhism developed. to current day, at our monastery at Mount Koya in Japan, our Buddhist priests go to pay their respects at the Shinto shrines at Mount Koya during New Year's, like we do here in Hawaii. You know, we go to Buddhist temples and we go to Shinto temples or shrines during the New Year's celebration. And it stems from all of the belief that Kobodaishi had, that all of the gods, all of the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas in this whole universe are all together. And that's the reason why we pay homage to the mandala, which is very similar to the Tibetan Buddhism, and you know the mandalas that we have. And in the very center is Mahavajrayana Tathagata, the son of Buddha. As I have to explain to a lot of our congregation members the meanings between the weddings and the funerals, you know, the purity and the dirtiness. I don't look at it as being purity and dirtiness. That's something that's been interpreted during the years, in many hundreds of years. You know, going back 1,200 years ago, Kobodaishi believed that it was all the same, all one. Everything is all one. So times have changed, interpretations have changed, teachings have changed. But we try to explain to them it doesn't matter whether you're married as a Shinto, or you're born and get your blessings as a Shinto, and you die as a Buddhist. It's the same thing. You get married as a Buddhist, or you have your baby's blessings as a Buddhist, or you can die as a Shinto and have a Shinto funeral. It's the same thing. There's no... What I should be saying is that we should not be saying that one is better than the other. And I think that's the trouble with the whole world right now. And the teaching of Kobodaishi was that we cannot ridicule other beliefs. We're all one and the same because we all stem from the same root. And I think that's the trouble with the world right now. Everybody's saying my religion is better than yours. And in their interpretation, yes, you know, they're saying that their interpretation of their own belief is greater than the others because they've gained something positive out of it. And all I can say, and we tell our congregation members, whatever makes you feel happy with what you do, what you believe, is the best thing that can happen to you. About the living ask, why is it necessary to have all these services? Why is it necessary to have a funeral service, have the 7-day, 49-day, 100-day? And we explain to them that in Christianity, we have the notion that once you die, you either go to heaven or hell. And we try to explain to our members that there's no such thing as heaven and hell. What we are living in this very world is literally hell. Yeah, with all the suffering that we have, all the illnesses that we have, you get frightened, you know, because you're going to this unseen area, something that you cannot perceive, the spirit. Your body is gone, but your spirit does live. We do mention that to them. Yes, it does continue. But it's something not to be afraid of. And that's what we strive to tell our members before they depart. Before they go to the other world, that is something that you should not be afraid of to cross over. I have to agree with what Dr. Baroni says. Every day we have strangers that come into our temple that ask for advice from our priests, no matter where it may be, even in Japan. Here in Hawaii, we have temples all over the state, and they come for help and advice because they have something that's troubling them. We don't tell them that you're crazy, go and see your psychiatrist. We don't. Because many a times they've gone to their doctors and they cannot achieve satisfaction, should I say. So their last resort is come to the priest for advice. So we try to help them, whether it may be prayer or whether it may be other means, counseling. They seem to have a relief. And whatever it may be, the outcome is, it's to their benefit. And they think back and they say, well, it was great. It was great to go and talk to the priest and gain this advice. And give them the comfort that they're seeking. instead of just turning our backs on them. And I think this is another prime area that Kobo Daishi really stressed upon, that he said that even if he is departed physically from this world, he will always be with us in spirit and always guiding us. And during the Obon season, we have the Bon dance, and we have a lot of non-Buddhists who participate, and they don't know the reasons why we have Bon dancing. They just think it's just a celebration. I make it a point to explain to them during the actual intermission why they are there, and to have it is a religious ceremony that we're doing. It's not for just dancing around and having a happy time. We're paying homage to the spirits that are returned, who have returned during this time of the year. Well, there's many, many more things that I can cover, but as I said, many of the things that I've grown up with during the time that I've been little and to this point where I'm still in the learning stage, I have to admit. Every day is a learning experience for me. Until I go to that other spiritual world, I'll still be learning. And I take this opportunity every day, that every change, you know, what never repeat it twice. Accept it as it is. There's a reason why it's happening. And we explain to the living that everything that is happening, there's a reason why. And there's a reason why somebody has to pass away and go to the spiritual world. That their purpose on this earth has ended, and they're being taken to another spiritual world where their life continues. So that's something that I like to keep you thinking about. And this is how we in the Shingon tradition try to express ourselves in the way that we have our feelings, and we try to convey this to the living. That prayer is very important. Yes, it is. It's both for the living and for the dead. And the powers come in numbers. So in having a big number here, there's a lot of power, a lot of energy here. Thank you very much.
Here because we are 10 minutes late. So I guess we won't have time for question and answers. Sorry about that. So we will adjourn. Thank you very much. Next on the program will be a panel discussion led by Dorothy Ono, Director of Project Malama and Advisory Board Member of the Project Doctor. And panelists, Yoshiaki Matsuoka, Karen Oda, Grace Sakura, and Elaine. I have she left town. Does she know?
Hi, Elaine, Karen, Grace. While we're waiting for the panelists to come up, I know some of this accident right now is a very convenient time. Yoshiaki, Karen, Grace, and Elaine. If you notice on the yellow sheet on the back, it gives you the joys of volunteer caregiving. Thank you. The joys of volunteer caregiving, helping the frail, elderly, and disabled, and presented by a panelist, and there's a misspelling in the word panelist. Then it goes on: 1, Yoshiaki Matsuoka; 2, Karen Oda; 3, Grace
look around and I thought, wow, the person that typed this had a Freudian slip. It is Grace Zuckerman and Forrest Fukuda. Thank you very much for staying. I know the seats are very hard. This afternoon, we have a kind of group of people. We have, all 5 of us have 2 things in common. Number 1 is that we are all volunteers at Project Dana. And the second common factor is that we have all of us in the past year or so, and some of us within the past few months, a family member has died. A parent, a spouse, a child. So we have those 2 things in common. And I will go down and introduce all the speakers. And in the interest of time, I have asked them to please limit themselves. They have a world of experience, not only in their own personal lives, but also in working with the frail elders as Project Dana volunteers. First of all, we have, to my left, Yoshiaki Matsuoka, who is a volunteer with the Moini-Ili Honganji Project Dana, and he has been one of the very, very interested and very concerned person, and has been working from the outset of the project over 4 years. Next to him is Karen Oda, and she is one of the newest coordinators, and this is the Minimani Honganji Project Dana. Next to Karen is Grace Zuckerman, and Jikoen Temple was, I think, the second or third temple that joined Project Dana. Grace is coordinator at the Jikoen Temple Project Dana. And the 4th speaker is Elaine Fukuda, who is a volunteer with the Kailua Honganji Project Dana. Without going into detail, what we will do is they will speak from their tables and just pass the mic on from each other. So, first of all, Yoshiaki.
Thank you, Dorothy. At this time, I would like to share with you some of my experience I had as a volunteer caregiver. I've been with Project Dana for about 4 years. But before I go into my experience, I would like to tell you something about myself. I retired from Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard after 35 years of service, and I retired in 1978. And in 1981, I worked for the Honolulu City County Street Lighting Department, and I worked there for 6 years. That's double duty, But anyway, and I have a son who's married, and I have 2 granddaughters. 17 years ago, I lost my daughter, who was 22 years old. She just graduated from UH Manoa, and she majored in special education. But that was 1 month before she started to teach. And in 1993, I found out that my wife had acute leukemia, and she had only 3 months to live. So I lost her last year, in 1993. Being with Project Dana, I deal with the elderly, the frail, the handicapped, the terminally ill, and people that under hospice. And within the 4 years that I had worked with Dana, Project Dana, 7 people had died that I have cared for. And people ask me a lot of times that if I don't get depressed working with these people. Yes, if you do look from the outside, you see a person that's suffering it's different from when you actually care for that person. It's a different kind of a feeling. It's like you become, I feel as though I'm part of the person that's sick, and I try to do whatever I can to make him comfortable. And like I would go in and massage the person. If he can't speak, I would just hold him, touch him, and massage him. And you can tell that he likes that, he appreciates that. And what comes to my mind is the first person that I had cared for. He was a quadriplegic. For 13 years, he was paralyzed. And he either be in bed or in a wheelchair. And he had a motorized wheelchair. And before the members go to work, they would place him in a wheelchair and sit him in front of the television. And he would be home all alone just watching television all day. So